Mile 50 was approaching slowly, and I was stumbling, running 15-minute miles downhill. The weather had shifted from hot and sunny to cold and rainy, and at 10,000 feet above sea level, my body could no longer regulate itself. Fever set in. My body started shivering uncontrollably. Then, my feet had had enough. Every step hurt so bad that I wished I was walking on Legos. I felt shooting pain from my feet all the way up into my hips. I closed my eyes and continued to move, imagining that if I couldn't see anything, the pain maybe would go away. I tried to disassociate from the scenario, but it wasn't working. Instead, when I reopened my eyes, I was just more dizzy than before. A short time later, I found myself flat on my back in the middle of the trail. Rain was pattering down on my face. In that moment, I didn't want to be conscious anymore. But somehow, I continued on. And my hatred for myself was so strong, I felt like I deserved the pain. With 40 minutes left in the race, I said, "Closest to death I've ever felt. I feel like I could just lay down and die." Then after the finish line, I hopped in the car. I was so physically wasted, I couldn't control my emotions at all. Then I stayed in bed for days, and it took me over a month to fully recover. My lungs felt like they were bruised and permanently damaged. This is a good example of how not to run an ultramarathon. The first thing you need for an ultramarathon that you may not need for a marathon is a predetermined list of things that give you the freedom to drop out of the race. You must plan to DNF so that you know when to stop. And there's no right answer. It's all about what you want for the race. You could drop out when you feel uncomfortable or when you're no longer having fun. On the other hand, you could commit to only dropping out when you pass out or when medical pulls you out of the race. I'm not telling you when to drop out. I'm just saying to have a plan so that you can win no matter what on race day. My personal rule is that pushing through a race is not worth long-term injury. Additionally, if I think it's going to take me longer than a week to recover from the race, I'm going too much. But if I were competitive or had a chance at the Olympics, I would probably PR or ER. But wait a minute. I thought, Kramer, you were going to talk about gear you need for ultramarathons that you don't need for marathons. Yes, we are, but I wanted to bookend this video with two mindsets, one at the beginning of the video and one at the end of the video. So let's jump into the gear that you may need for an ultramarathon. And at the end, there is some frosting on the cake, if you will, a bonus mindset that may just determine whether or not you have a good or a bad day on race day. I'm printing something off real quick. This is a master list. Okay, so I created this to help you guys. You can screenshot that, or I've got this as a downloadable PDF on our website. No email required, nothing, just you can just grab that so that you can have a big master list. When running an ultramarathon, you are extending your time and you're also extending distance between aid stations, which is a big one. So on a normal road marathon, you may have an aid station every 2 to 5 miles, which would mean for most people, less than every hour you're going to have an aid station. Whereas on an ultramarathon, you can go multiple hours without an aid station, and that's where a lot of this planning needs to come into play. I'm not covering anything longer than 20-hour races. I'm talking about 20 hours and less right now. So here are the big ones. Number one, a running belt or running vest. Lots of people running half marathons and marathons use this. I've used it on a road half marathon when I was starting out running. But you're probably going to need something to carry your gear in too. Next, a portable charger for a headlamp or a phone. This is near the top because if your headlamp runs out of battery and you're finishing at night, they will generally pull you from the race and not let you finish the race. Often, same thing with phone. They want you to be able to communicate if you break a leg on the side of the trail or something, so you need a charged phone, and some races even check your headlamp and phone at the last few aid stations to make sure that they're good to go. A watch that lasts the duration of the race. I had a Garmin 245S, and I ran a race, and it was at 100% when I started and 3% when I finished the race. The week later, I sold that watch and I got this Coros. Now I can run for weeks without the watch dying. You just want to make sure your watch has enough battery to last the entire race. And the reason this is important is because using watch for navigation is the next tip. You want to download the GPX file, which is basically the GPS maps of the exact course. And you put that onto the watch. And for most running watches, they're going to alert you when you're off course, which is really nice because sometimes flags can get moved or there's splits in the trail on these ultras and it's tough. And on more than 3 occasions, I have saved my fellow runners who are started going down the wrong path. And I said, hey guys, it's this way. And they're like, how do you know the flag's, I said, my watch says it. And sure enough, the flag blew off the tree to another trail. There's another time when I'm running down the path and some other racers were coming against me and they looked at me weird, and I was like, what's going on? Like, I was confused, and they had run down the wrong path and were trying to figure out which way to go, and I was able to help assist them in the right way, all because of taking 2 minutes to download those files. So a watch that accepts GPX files and long enough battery life is important. Not fully necessary though. Next is sunscreen on the trail, something like that. Because you're out there so long, even in the winter, if you get a sunburn by noon, midday, and then you're out there till dark, that's going to take up so much of your body's resources to try to heal that burnt skin. It's totally unnecessary. This is going to sound like a plug here, shameless plug, but that's kind of why I invented this little product right here. This is called On the Trail, and it's for this exact need. I wanted something to take with me. So this is a sunscreen, chapstick, anti-chafe emergency, 3-in-1 little bar. So I take that with me and I rub it on my face, my lips for sunscreen. And then if I'm getting a thigh rash or my nipples are rubbing or something, I'll put that on there, and I'll actually keep this in my running vest, and it allows me to address the problem immediately instead of having it wear on for a couple hours before I get to the next aid station. If you don't use something like that, you could use like this one here is just plain anti-chafe, and this will work really good for that chapstick anti-chafe, and then you can do separate sunscreen. The main idea is you want to be able to take as little gear as possible to not have too much. If you put sunscreen in different drop bags and then ask aid stations, this is not necessary to take with you, but something to think about if you burn easy or sweat a ton. Headlamp is a must, and most races make you take extra batteries or a backup headlamp. Most of the ultras over 50 miles will start in the dark and then finish right around dark, sometimes a few hours after dark, depending on the time of year and the location in the world. If you're doing a 50K, it's not so necessary normally. Trekking poles are optional, but if you're doing a lot of elevation and climbing and you're new to the sport, I find it being very beneficial. And some people estimate that it takes about 10% off of the effort in your legs. I really like trekking poles for uphills, and then I'll put them away running down. Another difference from the marathon is mandatory gear. And this will happen on some trail runs as well, like the Pikes Peak Ascent and Marathon. Those extreme trail races, they do require some mandatory gear. Most of the time you don't get into too much mandatory gear until you're into ultra running. Mandatory gear normally is some sort of weather protection, rain protection jacket, sometimes an emergency blanket, sometimes a container that can carry a certain amount of liquids, certain amount of calories with you, GPS, phone, headlamp, backup batteries. Your race will specify exactly the mandatory gear. I also find it's quite necessary for a lot of us who are not competitive runners to have some real food. When your race gets beyond 10 hours, you don't really want to have gels the entire day. It's nice to take in something of substance. So if you test this in your training runs, then you can find out what you really like. I was doing a training run marathon around town. I stopped into a gas station. This will sound ridiculous, but they had one of those like chicken sandwiches in their heating warmer. This sounds absolutely disgusting right now, but it just looked so good. So I grabbed that, and I saw a Red Bull in the fridge, and I had that at like mile 16 of this training marathon in town. I drank a Red Bull and had a gas station chicken sandwich. God knows why, but I felt great. And it was one of the most fun finishes of a training marathon I had done, just not during a race, but just for training. And then on my next 100K, at the 31 mile mark, something like that, I had my wife bring me a chicken sandwich. I got Chick-fil-A, so an upgrade, with like a Red Bull. And it was great. I had that on my 100K. It made me feel good. So the point is, I don't know why some things feel good. Maybe my body's deficient in something that provided it. But if I just try gels the entire day, it doesn't work as good. I like to slow down a little bit, get a meal in like that. And then you're not going to feel great immediately probably, but maybe don't go quite as fast for those next 30 minutes, an hour, and then you'll feel good later on, maybe even better because you got some fuel in your body. Test it first, but the main difference for an ultra marathon than a marathon that you might actually need is some more real food. When going to ultra marathons, we're jumping into drop bags at aid stations. Drop bags are just string bags or maybe Ziploc bags, things like that. And the race will specify exactly where they'll bring your drop bags to. For most 50 mile to 100K races, there's going to be 2 drop bags, normally around the 20 and the 40 mile mark, something like that. It might be 18 miles and 35 or whatever. whatever, there's generally 2 spots, sometimes 3. Those drop bags, you can put gear in for contingencies, as well as extra hydration and nutrition. A good example is I did a race that started in daylight, but it finished in the dark. And so at the last drop bag, I had my headlamp, and I grabbed my headlamp at that last drop bag about 2 hours before sunset. And then I was able to carry that on and use the headlamp to the finish line. It was nice because I didn't have to carry the headlamp the entire time. Same thing is if there's a specific hydration you like, you can have extra bottles pre-mixed with your favorite electrolyte mix that you can just toss your bottles in the drop bag, grab your new bottles, and you're on your way. Also, you can throw chicken sandwiches and Red Bulls in your drop bag. I like to think of it as gear that you don't want to carry the entire time, or maybe gear you may need, but you're not sure. So there's a slight chance that there could be rain. Well, I'm gonna throw a rain jacket in this drop bag. And when I get there, if it started raining, I've got an extra t-shirt in there too. So I throw a new t-shirt on, throw my rain jacket on, and keep going. But then you don't carry that rain jacket the entirety of the race. It's kind of fun to strategically plan out when you may and may not need things. Change of socks or backup shoes. Not many people will change their shoes on 50 mile to 100K to 65 mile races, but most people won't change their shoes unless you're getting up closer to that 100-mile race. But some people do, and it depends on how your feet feel. And I have noticed if you change your shoes, your feet can be fresher longer because of just restarting that moisture content. So if halfway through 100K, let's say you're 30 miles in, you put on new shoes, new socks, new blister blocker. If you have feet problems, that can be hugely beneficial. Some people, same socks, same shoes the entire day, and they're fine. Just kind of depends where you're at and how hard you are on your feet. I mentioned Blister Blocker, which is this stuff, another one of our products. That is super useful just to moisture wick and to completely stop blisters from ever happening. And you want to take care of your feet before you have a problem. You don't want to apply like blister prevention once you have a blister. You want to stop it in the first place. I got 9 blisters on my first marathon and it sucked. And blisters are one of the top 3 reasons people drop out of races, because you get a blister, it gets worse, it pops, it rubs raw, then you're bleeding, then it's hurting every step. And when it's open, it's bleeding and you have sweat dripping into it. Now it's just stinging because you've got salty, wet sweat dripping into that wound. And it's a good reason to drop out if you get to that point. But that doesn't need to be the case. Here's a different story. Me, 9 blisters, first marathon, using it's a good product. I'm not hating on it. I'm just really heavy on my feet. But that's when I started testing and making my own blends. And on my 100K, this is how insanely particular I was with my feet because of how bad my feet can get sometimes. At mile 10, I swapped out my socks and reapplied blister prevention. At mile 30, I did it again and swapped out my shoes. Also at mile 30, I used cold water. Great hack on your feet. Cold water will tighten up your pores. You can clean your feet, dump some cold water. If you can soak it in it, even better. Wipe it down, and then it tightens up your pores, and then you put on blister prevention. And what ends up happening is it's like you're starting over again. Changed my socks and my shoes there at mile 30. And then at mile 50, I changed my shoes back to the other ones and changed socks again. But I got no blisters on a 65-mile race when I'm used to getting a ton. To build on top of that, what happens if you do get a blister? To have a little kit to take care of that is nice personally. I would prefer not to go to medical for a blister because I have my own method, which is basically super fine point needle, pop the blister, drain out all that nasty stuff, and then reapply blister blocker and new socks. And that is the most comfortable, healthiest way I found to deal with blisters. Okay, on the sheet, this is what I say. You don't need everything on this list. It's just a starting point. Distance, terrain, pace, and weather all shape what you're actually going to need. Most runners carry too much, so stash extra gear and drop bags instead of hauling it the entire time. I have this broken down to categories, so let's go into all the individualistic things now that I've covered the wide range of things, and here are just some things to think about. Category: clothes. Shoe, socks, shorts, shirt, undergarments, which is compression, bras, whatever you need. I prefer like the running shorts with the line shorts. I don't wear compression shorts anymore. I think it's much better to get real nice running shorts. Long sleeves, leggings, jackets, hat, beanie, gloves. Under accessories, you may need your running vest or running belt, collapsible running cup, sunglasses, battery bank, headphones, headlamp, backup headlamp with batteries potentially, sunscreen, or on the trail anti-chafe, blister blocker, those sort of things. Oh, and 20 squares of toilet paper can come in use as part of your emergency kit. Drop bags. The drop bag themselves can be all sorts of things. Often a Ziploc bag. I've seen people do gallon Ziploc bags. Other people will do string bags. That's what I normally do. And some races will provide you with a string drop bag, or you can do a backpack. The recommendation is to not put anything in the drop bag that you're not okay with losing, because it's a chance to lose it. Although I have dropped at this point probably about 12 drop bags and I've never lost anything. I like to hide an air tag in my drop bag as well. That way, just in case something happens, I can find it. What to put in the drop bags? Well, socks, shirt, extra layers of clothes, toothbrush. Some people like to brush their teeth when they're out there super long. Food, electrolytes, anti-chafe, blister prevention, batteries, charger, and charging cords, backup headlamp, or extra batteries. Nutrition, hydration, that'd be caffeine, coffee. I like to mid-morning hit some coffee. So I start most ultras, they tend to start about 5 a.m. Some will start at 6 depending on the time of year. But around like 8 or 9 a.m., I love a coffee. And if I can get like a cold brew in a can or something, I'll put that in that first drop bag and I get this nice caffeine hit then. It's just phenomenal. But I train that way too. Gels, electrolytes, salt tablets, element. You may want meals, which is more substantial food options for these longer races. For nutrition and hydration, just focus on bringing things that you may want that the aid stations don't have. If the aid station has it, I recommend using it. Utilize the aid stations as much as possible and train with the aid station food, gels, anything they provide. If you can smooch off the aid stations as much as possible, that basically means you have gear you can utilize at more frequent times. So that's really nice. Final note, test all your gear during your long training runs. If you haven't used it before, don't bring it to the race. The middle of an ultra is not the time to figure out how your headlamp works or to discover new food doesn't sit well in your stomach. That is some gear that you may need for ultras that you will not need for marathons, most likely, but I did promise some icing on this cake. There are many reasons people run ultra races. If you know why you're running, then you can be successful. Here are the 5 different stereotypes, I guess, of people running a race, and know which one you are, and then you can be successful. People who are racing to try to win. This is generally the top 5 or 10 people in the whole group, the whole race. 2, people who are attempting to set a personal PR. 3, people who've run the distance before, but today are trying to soak it in. They go 80% effort, maybe 90% effort. They're not gonna go all out and completely burn out, but they might have the most fun. I fall in that category a lot recently. 4, beginners who are just trying to complete the race. That's the goal. Nothing wrong with that. That's a fantastic goal, especially if it's a new distance, your first time. I think that should be your goal if it's your first time racing a new distance. 5, people who are testing their limits of pain. These people sign up on a bet. They sign up to say, oh, there's a 100-miler in 2 weeks and it doesn't take any qualifications. I'm signing up and I'm gonna see what my body can handle. I like this idea. My issue is when I do that type of running, I end up with an injury. Some people can push their body to passing out level without getting an injury, and those people can do this one healthily. I can't. I take it too far. I can't do this one right. If you know which one of those 5 you are, and you know your goals to complete the race, when people fly past running you, and you know who you are on race day, you'll be able to stick to your goals, your pace, and enjoy the day much better. Because a lot of people, and I've seen this many times, go out for their first 50-plus mile race, and boy, are they feeling good. Mile 10, great. Mile 15 is feeling pretty good. They've picked up their pace. They're keeping up with these people. But boy, will it hit you. And I've seen so many people burn out in between mile 28 and mile 40. They're used to running maybe a 50K or a marathon. And so they basically hold that pace, and then their body just says no more, and that wall gets closer and closer, and they're about to hit it. I say on these ultras, like, there's time later on to push it. But the first half of the race, your first 25, 30, 35 miles, it should feel easy. You should be like, I should be working harder. If you feel like that in the first half, you're probably doing it right. Links down in your quiver to 55miles.com. Go check that out. Get the PDF and links to some of the products I use if you're interested in supporting this channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for next week, because next week we got a banger coming out talking about how to actually go out and run a marathon as a training run. That's coming next week. I'll see you guys soon. Have a great day.